Okay, in this video, I would like to talk to you about our exceptions to the normal Mendel types of inheritance. So far, we've kind of been giving you the kindergarten version of genetics. And especially in humans, it hardly ever works like we've been talking about with a completely dominant and a completely recessive allele. So I'm going to give you a few examples here of how genetics plays out more realistically, especially in complex organisms. So the first page is going to talk about some more complex inheritance patterns, like incomplete dominance, where there is no true recessive allele. Both of the alleles are dominant, and when there is a heterozygous offspring, you actually see a blend of those two traits. For example, if you have a parent red flower and a parent white flower, the offspring will have a pink flower. In codominance, you would see a similar inheritance pattern. There's no recessive allele, but if you have a heterozygous offspring, in this case, let's say it's a flower again, of a red and a white parent, the heterozygote is going to be speckled or spotted or splotched. So you would have a red and white spotted flower. With multiple alleles, you have more than two choices for the alleles. So maybe your flowers were red or white or purple instead of just red or white. And with polygenic traits, it takes multiple genes to code for one trait. So maybe the flowers were a combination of several genes. And if you add on multiple alleles to that, if you have multiple genes that have more than two choices, you can get all kinds of ranges of colors for flowers. And this is how a lot of human traits work, like human height and skin color and hair color and eye color. It's a combination of multiple genes that make these traits. So let's work a sample problem. Because there's no recessive allele, you can't use the same type of notation for these problems. So we're going to have to modify how we how we write out alleles. So the first example here is going to be flowers. So we have a genotype that produces red flowers, and we're going to do this a little bit differently this year. So we're going to write, we're going to use a capital C for color, and each one will get two alleles. Instead of using this notation, we're going to use a superscript. So color and the dominant allele is R. So if you inherit two dominant alleles for color, you'll be superscript RR. For white, we're going to change that, and we're going to go with C and a superscript capital W. There is no recessive, so we need to make sure both of our notations are capital letters. And then the pink will be one of each. So let's go ahead and work a problem. Flower color, C, and then our three alleles are CR, and you can't have recessive. So let's just go ahead and write it out like this, because this is all you'll have. And W. That's a capital. Looks messy. Okay. So this is going to give us a red flower. This is going to give us a white flower. And this is going to give us a pink flower. Okay. So in our problem, we've got show a cross between a plant with a red flower. So the first allele is red. I keep drawing my C's little. There you go. And pink. So the other parent is pink. That's what pink will look like. Okay. So let's draw this in. CR, CR, BW. And make sure you pause the video if you're taking notes right now. Pause the video when you need to get caught up if I write faster than you. All right, so here is our offspring potential, and the problem says genotypic and phenotypic outcome. It didn't really specify. I'm going to show you ratios on this one, and I'll do something else on the next problem, because it doesn't really specify. All right, so we're going to look at genotypic and phenotypic ratios for this. Write small, because I'm going to squeeze a lot in right here. Okay. It's similar, but not exactly like we did with the simple Mendel inheritance. For the genotypic ratio, I'm going to jot down what the numbers are at the top, just so you'll remember if you go back in your notes later for this. So this is how we're going to fill in the ratio numbers. Just go in the order that you went in the problem. So we had two red genotypes, 2 RWs, and we didn't have any WWs. So 2 to 2 to 0. And for the phenotypic ratio, we're going to go red to pink to white. So again, it'll be 2 to 2 to 0, which is different, if you'll remember, from the the Mendel inheritance, which only had 2 phenotypes. Now we have that third phenotype in there that's going to get added to our ratio. If you had a co-dominant problem, you would work this the same way. You would use CR, CW, but instead of having a pink phenotype, you would have a red and white phenotype, and it would probably be spotted. So I'm just going to put red and white spotted for this as an example of what you would do for co-dominance. And we won't work any multiple allele problems or polygenic trait problems. All right, so let's move on to our next inheritance pattern, and this is kind of a special case with blood type. And for blood type, we have a situation where you have these little markers that stick outside of your red blood cells, and there's 2 different shapes, and we just named them A and B. So if you have type A blood, you have these little things that stick out of all of your red blood cells, and you can be dominant for both red alleles, or you can be heterozygous for that allele. The recessive allele actually means you don't have any of those little markers that stick up out of your red blood cells. So if you're type B, you either received both of the alleles or you are heterozygous for that. If you are type A blood, you inherited each of the alleles and you show both. They both stick out of your red blood cells. And because of that, we say that blood type is codominant because they don't blend. You see them separately. And then for type O, you got both recessive alleles and you don't have either A or B markers sticking up out of your red blood cells. Okay, so let's look at how you work problems for blood type. All right. The reason why we use I as our symbol is because there's a big fancy word that starts with I that describes this. And they use the first letter of that word. And I never remember that word is. It's like isoglutinous or something or other. I don't know. Okay, so we'll have 3 alleles, which makes blood type a multiple allele situation. So you can be A, B, or recessive. So this will give you type A blood, type B blood, or we're going to squeeze this in over here, type O blood. Okay, so in our problem, we've got AB and we've got heterozygous for type B. So AB, heterozygous for B. Let's fill in our Punnett square. All right, so here are our choices. Again, it just says show the outcome. So we don't really do ratios for blood type. So as you can see by where I erased everything, by the way, I erased everything because I didn't like my first video and I don't have another copy of the notes. So I just erased everything. So here are our 4 potential offspring genotypes from the Punnett square. So we could have a type AB child, a type B child. Oh, we wouldn't write B. Sorry about that. We have a possible type A child, or we can have a heterozygous type B. Each of these would be 25%. Now, if we needed to go for the phenotypic percentages, we have type, these are the possible blood types. Okay. For AB, we only have 1 offspring of the 4, which would be 25%. A, we have 1 offspring of the 4, 25%. And here, we have 2 possibilities for type B, so that would give us 50%, and there would be no type O offspring. Okay, and last but not least, we have the situation of sex-linked traits. And these are going to be found on the X chromosome. So if you remember correctly, with sex chromosomes, I'm just going to draw the chromosome as a line. You'll remember, if you remember what karyotypes looked like, we have 2 X chromosomes for females, and we have 1 X chromosome and 1 Y chromosome for males. If the female has a genetic disorder on her X chromosome, she's got 2 copies. So let's say there is a mutation here that causes a disease for color blindness. She has another copy of that allele, and if her other copy can produce healthy proteins, she won't necessarily have color blindness. But if a male inherits that genetic disorder on his X chromosome, he doesn't have another copy of it to try to get a healthy protein from, so he will automatically have the disorder. There are 3 examples of this that we use in class. Red-green color blindness is one of them. Duchenne's muscular dystrophy is another. That's a degenerative muscle disease. And then hemophilia is another one, and it is a blood clotting disorder where one of the proteins that helps seal over blood vessels that break, it clots it until those cells can divide and seal it. But it keeps people from bleeding out, and that protein is missing. So the way we do this, so that when we fill out our Punnett square, we remember not to give the Y chromosome the trait, is we use X and Y for our the letter that we use for the trait. So I'm going to go ahead and I want you to put in your notes what each of these genotypes mean. So all of these diseases are recessive. So you have to have both recessive alleles if you're female to have the disorder. So she has the disease, and dominant means no disease. But if you are heterozygous, first of all, only females can be heterozygous. Secondly, she will not have the disorder, but she will be a carrier of the disorder. So she can pass it on, but she herself doesn't have it. With males, you only have two options: no disease or disease. Okay? All right, so let's work a problem. We're going to do a hemophilia example. Remember, that's the blood clotting disorder. So our trait is hemophilia, and our allele is going to be X with a small h superscript because it is a recessive disorder. Okay? So we have a hemophiliac man and a woman who is a carrier. So if you'll remember from up here, to have the disease, you have to have the lowercase h. I'm going to abbreviate it. Okay? So recessive has the disorder, capital does not. In our case, we have a hemophiliac man. If he has it, he has to be lowercase. She is a carrier, so she has to have a good and a recessive allele. All right, so fill this in. Uh-oh, there's a child with the disorder, and here is a child with the disorder. So it's likely that 50% of their children would have the disorder. Or you could say it's likely that if they have a child, there is a 50% chance that he or she will have hemophilia. All right, that is it.